You're listening to the AmWritingFantasy podcast. In today's publishing landscape, you can reach fans all over the world. Query letters are a thing of the past. You don't even need a literary agent. There is nothing standing in the way of making a living from writing. Join two best-selling authors who have self-published more than 20 books between them. Now, on to the show with your hosts, Autumn Burt and Jasper Schmidt.
Hello, I'm Jasper.
And I'm Autumn.
This is episode 150 of the AmWritingFantasy podcast, and we are taking a closer look at chapters today. How to create chapters that hook your readers and hopefully give you some good and strong tips in the process here.
Absolutely. I mean, these are sort of the building blocks of that pull the reader through the story. And I don't think there's a lot of people who realize maybe the importance of setting them up. I mean, we spend so much time talking about the plot outline and what goes into the intro of your story, but we don't talk a lot about what actually is happening in each individual chapter. So I think this will be a good one.
Well, chapters or a book is made up by chapters, so I don't know why chapters would be important at all.
No, not at all. It's like building a wall without using any bricks.
Why do you need
problem.
Yeah.
Or putting them all.
Why do you even need walls?
Oh, there you go. But let's assume you want a wall, and if you just put your bricks, like just dump them in a pile, you're not going to have a very good wall. So you should make sure you put it together constructively.
Okay, well, if you say so, then I guess we have to talk a bit about that today.
Yeah, I guess we will. We'll talk about some construction equipment. No, how are things for you over there?
It's quite good. There is a school break here this week, so actually I don't have to get up that early in the mornings. That's very, very nice.
That is always a sweet thing, considering, especially, since I'd be getting up at 5 a.m. with my husband to see him off to his current training he's going through. Yeah, I'm envious. 5 a.m.'s a little early for me.
Yeah, the only problem is that now when you don't have to get up that early, you stay up later, and especially because my wife and I started watching Squid Game on Netflix. You heard about that?
Yes, I started up watching episode 1, and honestly, I didn't get into it. Maybe I was tired, so I just kind of put it aside. How are you guys liking it?
Oh, I love it. I think it's so good. I fully understand why it has caught on so big that it has. I think it's so good.
Oh, cool. I might have to try it again eventually. But I'll have to keep that in mind. Maybe I was just off that night.
Yeah, I don't know. But I think one good thing that can be taken away from us, for us as writers and authors, is that the writer who wrote Squid Game, he actually tried to sell the script for 10 years.
Really?
10 years.
Wow.
And it just, think about how much success it has right now. And it took him 10 years to sell it. And finally, Netflix said, okay, fine, we'll buy it. And then it's a massive success. Right?
That's crazy.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing to keep in mind for us as authors as well when we write our books and so on, that sometimes it just takes a long, long time and then success comes. So
and persistence and belief in yourself and just keep trying until someone finally says yes.
Exactly.
Very nice. I like
that. How about you?
Oh, it's been good. I showed you pictures, but yes, my husband and I and our dog went whitewater kayaking.
Yeah, it was so cute.
Yeah, we've done some really crazy adventurous things with this. He's a Cairn Terrier, so he's supposed to be like Toto, but he's a monster version of Toto. He's a little bit like 5 pounds bigger than Toto would be. But yeah, we went whitewater kayaking as a family, and it was just gorgeous fall weather, and that was right before it switched from being like 70-degree days to now it's like in the 50s and I've got the wood stove going. But that's nice too. It feels like fall. I can't complain. It's been kind of nice. I've been burning the candle at both ends though, because this is like while we're meeting and doing our recording, this is my afternoon slump time, and I'm trying with caffeine to get through it, but I'm horrible. I get up at 5 and I am dead until about 6 o'clock, and then my mind turns on and I'm fine. And I'm fine. I go through the afternoon and there's this slump, and then right around dinner time, I'll wake up and I'll be good till like 10, and I just can't change that rhythm in my body. It's been that way since I was a kid. And so, yeah, I'm kicking myself awake right now.
Yeah, but I think actually, I don't know, but I have a theory that probably a lot of people have it like that, because I know exactly what you mean. I can also be like in the morning, getting up for something. You're like really tired, and it's like, oh, it's early, and then you think, then I'll be thinking to myself then, okay, tonight I'm gonna go to bed early because I'm so tired and I need to catch up on sleep and so on. And I'll be tired throughout the day as well. Mm-hmm. On those days, not right today, but in general, I mean, if that happens, right? But then once I get to dinner time and afterwards, then I start waking up, and it's just like, then you don't want to go to bed. Yeah. And then the next day, the whole cycle repeats itself. And it's just like, I don't know, but you're not the first one saying it, and I have it the same way. I don't know if it's like something, probably not everybody, but I think a lot of people are like, they wake, my wife, the same thing. She wakes up in the evening. So I don't know. It's weird, isn't it? Maybe we are vampires or something.
Maybe we are, but I'm also really good at up until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. From like 6 a.m. to 1 o'clock, I am fine. I am full throttle. But it's like I need an afternoon nap. I need like at 1:30 to 2. I need like a little bit of a nap, and I'd be fine. And maybe I should just put that in my schedule somewhere, and I would probably be so much better. But I'm usually pushing myself through it.
So if it goes quiet on your end, then the listener will know it's because you take a nap. And
that's right.
We should just sit around here and quiet on the podcast, waiting for you to wake up, and then we can continue.
All right. Well, I won't do that to you. I think we can make it through.
Okay.
A week on the internet with the AmWritingFantasy podcast.
I noticed this morning that we just about to reach 7,000 members in the AmWritingFantasy Facebook group, Autumn.
That is so... I knew we were getting close. It seemed like we hit 6,000... went from 5,000 to 6,000 really, really quick. The 6,000 to 7 has been a little slower, but oh my gosh, that is so many people and so awesome.
Do you remember the early days, Autumn?
I remember when it was me making the group and then inviting a couple of fantasy authors I knew, and I hadn't even met you yet. Or maybe if I had, I didn't know you on Facebook yet. I only knew you on Twitter. And yeah, it was just me and a couple of people. So yeah, I remember very much so when it was me and some crickets.
Yeah, and it was called Slay It, the fantasy.
That's right.
The Facebook group.
That's right. I actually still have the original logo, like the artwork I did for it way back when, tucked away in my terabyte drive.
You should post it in the Facebook group, Autumn.
You're right. That'd be great. I will have to go and do that too. Especially if I happen to catch it at 7,000, I'll do a little celebration. And like, oh my god, this is when it was just me and like 3 other people, which I think are still members too. And so I will do that.
Yeah, that would be fun, I think, for people to see what it used to look like. But the funny thing is also when you have this many members, because there was somebody posting, and there's nothing wrong with this. I'm just mentioning it for the fun of it. So the people involved should not feel bad about it at all. But there was somebody posting whether or not it was allowed to ask for some beta readers in the AmWritingFantasy Facebook group. Mm-hmm. And then I posted or I replied to say that, yeah, as long as you don't ask people to sign up to an email list or, that in other ways you're trying to get them on your list or earn money from it or anything like that, then it's fine. And then somebody else replied to say, are you a moderator or have you checked this with the moderators? Because I'm not so sure that's allowed. And then I replied, I'm one of the co-owners of the group. But this is what happens when you have so many people. Some people don't even know who you are, right?
That's true, but I think it says it says admin next to our name.
It does, yeah. Yeah.
Maybe they just.
But it made me laugh this morning when I was like, she was asking me if I had checked it with the moderator.
I like that.
I don't think I need to.
Our authors know we run very tight ship, obviously. Tighter than we realize.
Yeah. So if you haven't joined yet, head on over to Facebook, search for AmWritingFantasy in the group section, and you will find us. But if you don't like Facebook or you don't use Facebook, I should also point out how you can go to amwritingfantasy.com and sign up for our email list. Through there, you will get information and you will get tips on writing. We share some world building advice and much, much more that we actually don't share anywhere else. And the best way is to just go to AmWritingFantasy.com, and then on the homepage when you arrive, there is actually the free self-publishing success course. So the easiest way to do it is just sign up for that, and then you're going to get a full course for free. And once you have gone through all the course material, you'll be automatically added to our email list. So that's the best way to do that.
Yes, come join us.
And on to today's topic.
All right, so chapters, Autumn.
Yes.
What do we say about chapters? They're quite important, I guess. If you want to build a house, that's what I learned so far.
Yes, they're very important if you're building a house. You can't build a book. Well, actually, I'm sure I would say you can't build a book without chapters, but I'm one of those people that as soon as you tell me you can't do something, I'm like, aha, I must try it. So I'm sure you can. I'm sure there is like stream of consciousness writing that James Joyce was probably like, never used a chapter, and it was just publishers that forced them on him. So you probably could write a book. It would just be really tough.
I think it'll be a mess.
Oh, it'd be such a mess. Don't do it. I think the best way to be organized is with chapters, and it gives you so many things you can do. I mean, you can change up your story, you can keep readers interested, you purposely hook them so they stay up till 3 a.m. because we're cruel to them. You can change point of view if you're writing in third person point of view. So chapters are really important. There's a lot going on in them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, well, it very easily starts sounding like science or something, this stuff, right? Like talking about how to do a chapter in the proper way. But I think, honestly, for a start, we have to say, like, this is our way of doing a chapter. It doesn't mean that it's the only way or the only right way at all. You might have other ways of doing it, or maybe you hear some advice from somewhere else that you think makes more sense, and then that's fine. If it works for you, it works for you, right? So we can only say that this is the way, in our view, that it should be done, but underline our view, okay?
Absolutely. And I guess, to me, we have some social proof that we're not doing things badly. I mean, I have a ton of reviews of people saying, I stayed up all night, I finished this book all the way through, or I didn't finish it all the way through, but that's only because it hit 4 a.m. and I'm supposed to go to work at 6, so I had to wait until the next day when I finally crawled out of bed after calling in 6 and finished it at 10. So I don't think we're doing anything wrong, because I've seen on both of our reviews that, you know, we have made readers stay up to the wee hours of the morning to read our stories. And that's partially comes through by the chapters, because if you mess up on a chapter and you have a hard end to one, if you don't pull the reader forward and they're like, I don't care anymore, I'm going to sleep, that's where they take a break. If they get confused, lost, or you just don't have something that makes them want to flip the page.
Yeah, true. Absolutely. And when we are talking about chapters, think of it as a mini story on its own. That's so right. By mini story, what I mean by that is that the character should be trying to achieve something, just like the dog is trying to achieve something now. So that's in its own little mini story there.
That was a chapter break.
That was a chapter break. That was a point of view change. It was saying, hey, it's my point of view.
That's right.
Yeah, but no, what I was trying to say is that this means that the character is trying to achieve something, and, you know, it shouldn't be so that the character is just sitting around in a coffee shop reading a newspaper or talking to some random other character. And honestly, I have seen books where this sort of thing happens. And you are wondering a bit like, why do I care about this? What's going on here, right? A chapter should contain some sort of sense of conflict and also some sort of, well, uncertainty to some degree, I guess you could say, something that makes you wonder what's going to happen next, right? Those should be the recipe for a good chapter.
Exactly. It's to me, it's like it's curiosity or mystery. There's something going on where whether it's the character who is is trying to solve something and draws the reader along, or if the reader is picking up clues and they want to see what's happening, or even just an action event, they either news that happens off screen or that's just received, or it ends at a battle and someone might be wounded and you're like, I have to turn the page. Those are part of the chapters. And I think one of the things we're talking about chapters as a building block of a novel, but there's building blocks in chapters. You can have a chapter that's an entire scene, and you can have a chapter that's made up of lots of little scenes. Well, maybe not too many. You don't want to put in maybe 10 scenes into a chapter. That might be a little intense. But 2 or 3, it can happen. You can have scene breaks within a single chapter. And so those are important parts to remember too. If you approach a chapter and you just don't know what to do, or you not sure what's in it, think of it as a scene. Scenes are different from chapters, but a lot of people get them confused.
Yeah, so maybe put a few more words on that, Autumn.
Oh, sure. Well, so a scene is an event that's happening, and usually, think of a stage, and you have a stage set, and your characters walk on, something happens, and they walk off. Sometimes with a scene, you change point of view, but you often change rooms, you change other things that are happening within. But the reason they're combined into one chapter is because the chapter has its own goal. And to me, that's the most important thing. And we talk about this. I know you're going to bring it up, but we have a plot development book, and we do talk about chapters in there. So that's a very good way. But to me, the first step in deciding what is making your chapter versus your scenes, or the scenes that make up a chapter, is a chapter has a specific goal. And I always look at it as like, I have a goal for the chapter as an author. There's a part of the plot. It is unveiling. So it's part of the inciting incident. It is part of the reaction phase. So that's my goal as an author. But there's also the character's goal. And that's the part that's moving the stories forward. And that's an important thing. You want to make sure the character has a goal when that chapter begins, and it's going to wrap up the end of that chapter and when goal is met or it's stopped.
Yeah, let me put it into context here, because you mentioned our plotting guidebook here, because in there we actually have, because now you're talking about character goal and so on. So I think just putting a bit of framework around it. The way we describe it in our book is that a chapter has 5 areas, or you used the word building block before. So if we go with that, 5 building blocks in a great chapter. So there is character goal, there is a hook, there is conflict and dilemma, there is reaction and decision, and there is the disaster.
Yes.
So by that, the idea is that you have a character who knows when the chapter starts what he or she wants to achieve. And this character then goes after that in one way or another that the reader will find fascinating or interesting. That's the hook part. And then it's not that easy to achieve what you want. And especially not when you live life as a fiction character. You live in the worst nightmare sometimes.
Usually.
But yeah. So it's not that easy, and something is standing in the way, and that's then causing the conflict.
Right.
And once you have the conflict, then you have a reaction to what happened. And that will lead into a decision on how to proceed that the character makes. And in the end, we will then finish a chapter on a cliffhanger. So if you can construct your chapter around those 5 steps, it will already be very interesting, because you are showing the reader that this is what the character is trying to achieve. Meaning that then the reader understands, oh, okay, this is what's happening. This is now I know what's going on. It's like when you enter a meeting in your day job and there is no agenda and you have no idea what you're going to talk about. It very quickly becomes very frustrating, because why are we here? What are we trying to do?
Right.
So putting that in front of the reader so that they understand what the character is trying to achieve, that's a good starting point. And then when you are making life difficult for the character and introducing the conflict and giving them something to react to, then it also humanizes the character, because then you feel like, okay, I can relate to that. I see why they're reacting this way, or they're getting frustrated, or whatever it may be. It's not that a good chapter has to have like dire consequences or something. It doesn't have to be like that. That's not what I'm trying to say, but more that there needs to be something at stake. And something at stake could just mean that I don't want my brother to find this thing out, for example, or it doesn't have to be like fight scenes or anything like that at all. But when you have something at stake, you have a reaction to it. And then when you end the chapter on some sort of cliffhanger, and again, by cliffhanger can mean a lot of things. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that it's like in the middle of a fight, or I think James, what is he called? John Brown. What is he called?
Which one? James Brown?
James Brown. I think he has one where he ends the chapter with the character opening a door, and then he stops, like, and you don't get to see what's inside. That's a bit, I would almost say, a bit lame, but okay. But it's a cliffhanger. But it doesn't have to be like that. It could just be like a cliffhanger. Could just be like the character is wondering about something, and you don't have the answer for it. And then you want to read on to figure out what is the answer. It could be all kinds of things. So don't take cliffhanger as like meaning that you have to put some dire consequences on the table in every chapter. Not at all.
No, it's more like almost an unanswered question or an unfinished event. I think those are a better way. And I do agree, because we often call it the chapter ends in a disaster, but it doesn't have to be a disaster. It's
disaster in quotation marks.
Yeah, that's just maybe a typical way of doing it, because often with hurdles, it is sort of a disaster. Someone's wounded and you don't know what happens. But you could be in a lull, or it could be a love scene or something, and someone walks into the ballroom, or whatever event you're at, the tourney or something. The next person walks in, their love interest or something, and you just stop there, and both of them going, oh gosh, there he or she is. And that's a cliffhanger, because you're like, well, what will they say? What will they do? You want to turn the page. It always should end on that wanting to turn the page. And it could be as simple as just receiving news, reading finally a letter that they've been holding in their hand and waving the entire chapter. They finally look and see what it says, and they're like, oh my gosh, this changes everything. And of course you want to turn the page to find out what's going to happen next. That's what's important.
And what's so nice about that is that because of what you just explained there, you already have the hook for the next chapter. And you also already know what the character wants in the next chapter. So it just adds another mini-story to the first mini-story. Yes. And it's so nice, because then again, you can build the next chapter with a clear beginning, a clear middle, a clear end. It just makes sense, right?
It does. They build off of each other, which is why it becomes a whole story. They flow into each other with set happenings and events to see what is going to happen next. And I always say, like, as a writer, I always want to write the ending to a chapter so excited that I want to write the first line to the next chapter. And so if you're that excited, the reader will be that excited. And I think that's what's important. It's just, it has a flow to it. And going even back to scenes. So if you think about it as that there's these 5 or 4 aspects into a chapter. Well, if you have the hook, and then the character is doing something and they're going through the conflict or dilemma, things aren't going well, and for some reason that character's point of view is done, and you do a scene break, the decision and action and disaster or cliffhanger could end up being in a different character's point of view. And that's sort of why you can have multiple scenes that fit into a chapter, but they still fit the chapter, because you are still following that hook, decision, dilemma, the action, emotion, reaction, and then the cliffhanger, disaster, event that is unfinished that you want to turn the page to see what happens to it.
I think the challenge faced by many writers is actually how to make that conflict part varied. Because, I mean, you cannot have a 400-page book where every single chapter has a fight in it. Or not, I mean, it could be either a physical fight, but it could also just be people arguing. I know when I started out writing at first, I had a tendency to create a lot of arguments in a lot of the chapters because it added conflict. So my line of thinking was good. But the thing is that it gets a bit tiresome if the characters are always arguing with somebody. So I think personally, your first spur of inspiration is in 99% of the cases going to be probably quite full of cliches,
Yes.
and that's why we prefer at least to do a detailed chapter outline compared to a very loose one, or even compared to writing by the seat of your pants, because I think that the problem is often that you keep beating the same old horse on and on and on.
Yes, I think that's very true. And I think it also comes down to knowing your character really well, because you as an author have, like I mentioned, you have a goal for what's happening in the chapter. And if you're trying to force things on your character, it's going to come across as artificial and it's not as interesting. The stakes don't feel real. Something just feels off to the reader. But if you have a character and you give the character a goal, like you say, okay, this is going to be a hurdle, and you're going to throw something horrible at the character, and you're like, okay, character, you go again, you're going in there, this is your goal, and this is what's going to happen. And then let the character figure out, what in their world are they going to do to solve this? Why do they want to solve it? Knowing your character really well, knowing how they'll react, will help pull you through, and will also help the reader really resonate with the character, because it'll, you want to feel that character trying to problem solve and get out of it on their own, instead of being pushed forward along by the author because you need to go to the next scene. You can definitely tell when you're reading.
Yeah, and of course the character arc is incredibly important in this whole conversation
Definitely.
to make sure that you build in at certain points throughout the novel, in some chapters, where you're gradually showing, of course, unless the characters are on a steady arc where they don't change, but otherwise that you have some chapters throughout the novel where you're gradually showing that the character is beginning to change.
Yes.
And we go through it in great detail in our guidebook on how to plot a novel. But high level, it's often a good thing to start showing the reader how the character actually insists on doing the same thing as they've always done, because that's how we work as human beings. we only start changing once we figure out that what I'm doing is apparently not working. And only once we realize that, that's where we start changing, because otherwise we're not going to change. Human beings are lazy people. We are. We don't want to change. But once we start, we keep banging our heads into the wall because we keep doing the same thing and it doesn't work, then at some point we will usually start questioning ourselves, like, I wonder if I could do something differently. And then that's where you start seeing the change. So that's a good thing to keep in mind when you're writing as well, with your chapters, to have for a while the character keep doing the same thing and keep facing the same problem, like from a character arc perspective, like they keep failing basically, and then gradually over time they'll start try to do some other things and get a different result, and thereby you solidify the change in the character.
Yes, that is very true, and such an important aspect. And of course, when you say doing the same things, you don't mean like, going and trying to, attack the knight that he's obviously not prepared to do. He's not going to do that 3 times in a row, but you're going to maybe have him pick 3 different fights, or just always be in over his head, always react stubbornly or arrogantly and not ask for help. And then finally, there's going to be that moment where maybe, and it's usually called the dark night of the soul, that moment where, something happens and someone's wounded or hurt or killed because of their stupid actions, and they finally go, next time I'm going to ask for help because I don't want that to ever happen again. But again, that's more the entire plot, but it's so true. Each chapter is just pulling the novel forward. And I want to get back to it. You mentioned also, speaking of, not repeating, you said about not repeating like the same disaster, the same conflicts. And I also think it's really important not to repeat the exact same hook or the exact same chapter ending. And those can be as simple as dialogue is a fantastic, like if 2 people are in the middle of a conversation, that's a neat chapter opening, and sometimes it's a really neat chapter ending. But you don't want to have every chapter opening being dialogue, or every chapter opening being a description, or even action. all of those are things you should take notice of and kind of vary them throughout your novel so that one maybe is a dialogue, but another one's an action, maybe one's a description. Keep things varied, and that'll help make your writing a little bit more interesting. It'll help remind you to keep things different with each one. And, challenge you. Isn't writing all about challenging yourself to become a better somebody?
Yeah, I would say so. I don't know. Are we missing anything? I feel like that's pretty encompassing for how to create good chapters.
I think so too. I mean, I can't think of anything else. The best thing to do is to check out, like I said, the plotting book. We get into so much more detail on character arcs and plotting the whole novel, as well as how to lay out your individual chapters, the difference between chapters and scenes, and some good examples in there. So I think those are really what's important to take a look at if you really want to go in depth, because there's a lot more to this, and nailing your chapters and knowing how they build your story is going to, one, help you learn to write better. And, if you're doing well in your chapters, those are usually, like when I was writing and I had writing goals, my goal was not a word count until I got Scrivener, and it makes you, it allows you to do a word count goal. But I used to always be like, I want to write this many chapters this week. It's a nice solid building block that helps you break down your novel into bites that are really the reader's bites. The reader is going to stop and start at chapters. They don't usually stop or start right in the middle of a chapter. Who wants to do that? That's because someone came in and took the book from your hand, or your Kindle ran out of batteries. That's when you stop in the middle of a chapter. Or if you're really bad, if it's really, really bad, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the chapter is only part, it's only one piece of the entire puzzle. So our book is called Plot Development, and it is a very full step-by-step guide. You'll get everything in that book. You will learn about the character creation as well. You'll learn about the character arcs, how to build the entire novel outline, how it affects the chapters, and how to build those chapters, and so on and so on and so on. So you're going to get everything you need in that one book. So we've added a link to that one in the show notes if you are interested. So next Monday, we are talking about the evil within. It's about your characters and how to explore them in greater depth.
If you like what you just heard, there's a few things you can do to support the AmWritingFantasy podcast. Please tell a fellow author about the show and visit us at Apple Podcast and leave a rating and review. You can also join Autumn and Jasper on patreon.com/AmWritingFantasy. For as little as $1 a month, you'll get awesome rewards and keep the AmWritingFantasy podcast going. Stay safe out there and see you next Monday.